The minority did not call any witnesses for today's hearing. They have chosen to ignore the hearing as they chose to ignore President Biden's mental decline, but we do have a short video of some previous statements from Biden administration officials and Democratic Party officials telling us not to believe our lying eyes. We can play the video.
Does the president have the stamina, physically and mentally, do you think, to continue on even after 2024?
Don, you're asking me this question. Oh my gosh, he's the president of the United States. You know, I can't even keep up with it.
The most difficult part about a meeting with President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
I can testify because I've been working very closely with this president for the past 2 years. I've been knowing him for 30 years. And I'm telling you, this guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game.
Joe Biden has vision. He has knowledge. He has a strategic thinker.
The president is focused. He's detail-oriented. He's always thinking about the big picture.
He is engaging. He is capable. He has an incredible record as president.
And I'm often with him on foreign trips. He's at the top of his game.
So he has a vision. He has knowledge. He has judgment. He has a strategic thinking.
I met with the president, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and he seemed fine to me.
I have complete confidence in the president. I have watched him expertly guide meetings of staff and cabinet members. I could not have more confidence in the president.
I would just tell you that I meet frequently with the president, and every single time I meet with him, he is just fine.
But he is, again, knowledgeable, wise.
Incredibly sharp, incredibly probing, incredible command of the details.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
There is nothing to these challenges, these suggestions that somehow he's not sharp and he's not capable.
We see Joe Biden up close. We know how attuned he is to the issue.
And you're going to see how smart he is and the experience he has.
I say his age is an asset.
Aha!
He's wise.
Yes, he's wise. He has wisdom. He has experience.
And his experience, because of his age and his wisdom, has been invaluable to this country.
A lot of countries, people who've been in office a longer period of time are praised for their wisdom.
I have seen a lot of 72-year-olds not as capable as this 80-year-old.
It is hard for us to keep up with this president.
His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years. He's fine. All this right-wing propaganda that his mental acuity has declined is wrong.
And this kind of sense that he's not ready for this job is just a bucket of BS that's so deep, your boots will get stuck in.
Yeah.
Okay. Professor Harrison, I do want to ask a couple questions. I just want you to presume for a moment that that a pardon was issued under President Biden's auto pen signature, but issued without his direction. It comes to light that that he actually didn't direct it. A member of his staff used the auto pen for a pardon. What recourse is available under those circumstances?
Well, Senator, I think there would be two questions. The first has to do with whether, and I can't answer it other than to identify the question, which is to say sometimes documents that are properly authenticated are treated as having been validly issued even when they're not. That can happen. There are legal rules that produce that result, and I don't think there is such a rule about a pardon, but I would have to inquire into that again because there are such rules. The other thing I'd say is that for a pardon particularly, the only situation I can think of that clearly would bring into question whether the pardon was valid, which was the first question, was if the government sought to prosecute someone. and the person who purportedly received the pardon offered the pardon as a defense, then the government might say that, no, the pardon was invalid and therefore you weren't pardoned, you're still subject to prosecution. There might be some other way for a question like that about a pardon to come up. I can't think of another, but that's the one I can think of.
So from your perspective, let's just say that if there isn't any other legal recourse other than the one that you sort of brought up, what advice would you give to this committee or this Congress or this Senate to address that? What remedies could the legislative branch enact?
It's hard to think of anything Congress can do ex post. That's why I do think that it would be advisable ex ante to improve the process of authentication and make it more clear that documents that are signed by AutoPen really do reflect a decision by the president. That done in advance will make whatever the authentication system is more reliable.
Mr. Wald, given sort of the role that you played in trying to provide more transparency of what happened during the 4 years under Joe Biden, who was running the country under Joe Biden? Let's just take the last 2 years.
It's a great question, Senator, and at some level, I'm not the right witness for this hearing. I mean, there should be members of the media here, maybe some of your Senate colleagues who had known the president over the years and obviously had close proximity during the time of his administration, and obviously his staff. I think, sort of align with your previous question, there is a real consideration here on authentication. And in my time in the first Trump White House, there was an exhaustive process to determine how paper flowed into the Oval and when the president had given his assent to a certain action. That was through, in fact, 2 different policy channels, the staff secretary, and then there was also an office essentially of policy management guiding the flow of documentation. If the Biden administration staffers and personnel wanted to put this to bed, they could very easily dispel all of this by saying, here are the documents that show the president assented to these actions. The Trump administration would have that. Previous administrations would have that. And if that's not there, then there is cause to improve the way that executive branch employees authenticate actions undertaken by the president.
Yeah, I mean, the president actually performing the functions of president is kind of an important thing in our constitutional order. You had, kings used to affix their seal to show that this was an official declaration from the sovereign in this country. The sovereign are the people. They delegate, the authority to their elected representatives. And as you mentioned in your opening statement, there's only one person elected by everybody. So that signature, this is not just a small point, that signature issuing a pardon for someone who'd been convicted of a crime, or in the case of Joe Biden, these preemptive pardons, which are sort of unprecedented, is a big deal. And I think that's part of the reason why we're here today. Mr. Spicer, I wanted to ask you, you alluded to this, but the media is so desperate to make sure President Trump never got back into office. Of course, you saw the lawfare that took place, but then, of course, this narrative that Joe Biden was fine, don't believe your lying eyes, until that they couldn't deny it anymore based on the debate. Could you just kind of compare that to your experience when you were, press secretary for President Trump, to sort of the inquiries that were made daily about his mental acuity versus the inability to do that during the 4 years under Joe Biden?
Well, Senator, in many cases, there was no inquiry. They would just run with a story, having guests on that would question his physical or mental acuity, speculate on it, bring guests on that would speculate it. We would often then push back on those kind of stories. That's in vast contrast to the lack of any kind of curiosity that existed throughout the 4 years of President Biden. And I think the difference was they would seize on the simplest thing with President Trump, whereas in President Biden's case, there was multiple issues of physical, mental confusion, him going in the wrong direction, him falling down, him misunderstanding an event or not being able to finish the sentence. That was never the case with President Trump. They were almost manufacturing instances in his case without actually trying to get to the bottom of a story or inquire within the press office to get our response. They would go with the story, then we'd push back. With Biden, my understanding from the conversations that I would have with the media is they would never ask. They just literally were basically afraid to go there.